Welcome to today's exhaustive chronological exploration.
Thank you.
We are going to look into the history, the tragedies, and the absolutely enduring legacy of an iconic American rock band formed in Jacksonville, Florida.
Right.
We have an enormous stack of sources on the table today. We've got historical articles, extensive musical research, and just pages and pages of our own notes.
That is a massive pile of information, yeah.
And our mission here is to distill all of that into a comprehensive biography of what I would call a true musical institution. We are tracing their story from its earliest roots in 1964 all the way to the present day.
Which is an incredible timeline when you really look at it.
It really is.
Yeah.
We are talking about a group of teenagers who started out playing on rival baseball teams.
Yes.
And they went on to sell over 38 million records in the United States alone.
That's just domestic sales, too.
Exactly. And their story, it involves a strict high school physical education teacher, a frantic 17-day album recording sprint, a devastating plane crash, and a musical legacy that outlived every single one of its founding members.
To set the parameters for you, the listener, we are going to look at this highly complex narrative through an entirely factual lens.
Right. No speculation.
Exactly. We will uncover surprising facts that the average person simply does not know, looking very closely at their humble origins, the undeniable heights of their peak fame, the immense heartbreak they endured, and the controversies that followed them.
We really want to unpack the psychological and cultural whys behind these events.
We do. We want to provide a clear, objective view of how a group of local musicians built a sonic architecture that continues to resonate globally decades later.
So we begin our chronological journey in the year 1963 in Jacksonville, Florida.
The absolute starting point.
To really understand this band, you have to look at the prehistory. At this time, a young teenager named Alan Collins received his first guitar.
And he subsequently joined a local band called the Mods.
Fast forward to early 1964, and another local teenager, Ronnie Van Zant, joined a different group.
Right, they were called the Squires.
But he quickly renamed them to us, just the word us.
Which is a bold name for a teenage band.
It really is. That same year, the local music scene hosted a battle of the bands. The group Us, fronted by Van Zant, competed directly against the Mods, featuring Collins.
And Us actually ended up winning that competition.
They did, though Van Zant actually left the group shortly after their victory.
He was moving fast.
Very fast. In the early summer of 1964, a separate trio formed. This consisted of bassist Larry Junstrom, drummer Bob Burns, and guitarist Gary Rossington.
And they called themselves Me, You, and Him.
Looking at all these shifting alliances, what does this tell us about the environment these young men were operating in?
It tells us that neighborhood geography and juvenile rivalries form the absolute bedrock of this story.
Yeah, totally.
These were teenagers living in the exact same area, constantly circling each other in the local music scene.
They were just hungry to play.
They were hungry, they were swapping band members, and they were constantly competing for local recognition. But what is truly fascinating is the inciting incident here.
The moment that brought them all together.
Right. The moment that actually brought the core founders together did not happen on a stage. It didn't happen in a music store.
It happened on a baseball field.
Exactly. Later in the summer of 1964, Van Zant, Rossington, and Burns were all acquainted through playing on rival baseball teams.
And during one particular game, Ronnie Van Zant hit a baseball that ended up striking and injuring Bob Burns.
It is incredible to think a baseball injury sparked a rock and roll institution.
It really is, because that injury led to a conversation which led to a decision to jam together.
Just boys talking after a game.
Right. One afternoon, the three of them set up their musical equipment in the carport of Bob Burns' parents' house.
A classic suburban starting point.
They played the hit song, Time Is on My Side by the Rolling Stones.
And they liked the sound they produced so much that they immediately decided to form a band.
They brought in Larry Junstrom to play bass, which rounded out the initial lineup.
But they still needed another guitarist.
They wanted that fuller sound early on, so they decided to approach Alan Collins.
The guy from the Mods.
Exactly. And the story of how they recruited Collins is wild. When Van Zant pulled into Collins' driveway, Collins actually fled on his bicycle.
He literally ran away.
He ran away and hid in a tree.
Because he thought Van Zant was coming to beat him up.
Right. It took some convincing for Collins to realize he was not in danger.
He was actually being asked to join their band.
He agreed to join just 2 weeks later.
That detail perfectly illustrates the adolescent dynamics at play here. You have a physical altercation via a baseball injury leading to a musical partnership.
And then a recruitment driven by the fear of a physical beating?
Because Van Zant already had a reputation as a tough individual in that neighborhood.
He was definitely an imposing figure. Once the group was formed, the sheer dedication required from these teenagers was remarkable.
They rehearsed relentlessly.
They were completely consumed by the music.
To the point where Burns' parents eventually complained that the noise was simply too much.
They were playing in a carport after all.
Right. So the teenagers packed up their equipment and moved their rehearsals to Larry Junstrom's carport.
During this period, they cycled through several band names as they tried to find their identity.
They started as My Backyard.
Which is fitting, given where they were practicing.
True. For a day or two, they were known as Conquer the Worm.
That is a very 60s name.
It is. Then they became the Noble Five.
And by 1967, they had settled on the name The 1%.
Which brings us to 1968 and the legend of Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Right, because the band had grown tired of using the name The 1%.
The audiences were brutal. They would constantly taunt them, telling them they only had 1% talent.
So Ronnie Van Zant actively sought a new name. It was drummer Bob Burns who suggested Lynyrd Skynyrd.
This name was chosen for two very specific reasons. First, it was partly inspired by a character named Lynyrd Skynyrd in the novelty song Hello Mutta, Hello Fado by Alan Sherman.
Oh, I remember that song.
Right. But second, and more importantly, it was a mocking tribute to a physical education teacher at Robert E. Lee High School.
A man whose real name was actually Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Exactly. This seems like a very specific, localized target for a band name.
It was incredibly specific, but it represented a broader cultural tension at the time.
Lynyrd Skynyrd was notorious within the high school for his strict enforcement of the school's regulations regarding male hair length.
And the late 1960s was a period of intense cultural friction regarding hair length.
It was often viewed as a symbol of youthful rebellion against traditional authority.
Gary Rossington actually dropped out of high school entirely because he was tired of being continually hassled about his hair.
There is a profound irony in naming a band that would become a massive countercultural rock institution after a strict, rule-enforcing high school disciplinarian.
It is the ultimate teenage rebellion. By 1969, the band adopted the distinctive spelling with the Y's,
Officially becoming the entity we recognize today.
What is genuinely surprising about the Lynyrd Skynyrd connection is how the relationship evolved over time.
You might assume the animosity lasted forever.
Right, but despite the friction during their high school years, the band and Skynyrd actually developed a friendly relationship later in life.
The band even invited their former PE teacher to introduce them at a concert at the Jacksonville Memorial Coliseum.
Which is just an amazing full-circle moment.
Furthermore, Skynyrd had become a real estate agent,
Right.
and the band utilized a photograph of his Lynyrd Skynyrd Realty sign on the inside cover of their third album.
It demonstrates a real maturity and a sense of humor from both parties. The symbol of their teenage oppression eventually became an integrated part of their established brand.
As we move into the early 1970s, the band began to dominate the Jacksonville music scene.
They were headlining local concerts and securing opening slots for national acts.
They were initially managed by Pat Armstrong and Alan Walden.
And later, management transferred to Peter Rudge.
Musically, this was a critical developmental period. They were actively crafting what would become known as the Southern Sound.
And this was not entirely organic. It was a deliberate, creative blend.
They were mixing country music, blues music, and a slight but very noticeable influence from British rock bands.
They were taking the music of their region and supercharging it with the amplification and attitude of the British invasion.
During this developmental phase, the band experienced their first significant lineup shifts,
Larry Junstrom left the group.
and Greg T. Walker stepped in briefly to play bass.
Around this time, Ricky Medlock joined the band to serve as a second drummer and a second vocalist.
Fortifying the drum sound alongside Bob Burns.
Medlock had deep roots with the founding members, having grown up with them.
The sources note that Medlock's grandfather, Shorty Medlock, served as a direct influence for the writing of the band's song, The Ballad of Curtis Lowe.
So they are pulling heavily from their immediate surroundings for inspiration.
Exactly. They were writing about what they knew, who they knew, and the environment that shaped them.
The real turning point occurred in 1972. The band was performing at a venue called Finocchio's in Atlanta, Georgia.
And in the audience was Al Cooper.
A highly respected musician, songwriter, and producer known for his work with blood, sweat, and tears.
Cooper recognized their potential immediately. He signed them to his Sounds of the South label, which was distributed by MCA Records.
Cooper also stepped in to produce their first album.
But the impending reality of fame brought intense psychological pressure.
Bassist Leon Wilkeson, citing severe nervousness about the prospect of fame and success, temporarily left the band during the early recording sessions.
He only played on 2 tracks before departing.
So, right as they secure their massive break with Al Cooper, they lose their bassist. What is the impact of that departure on the band's structure?
It forces a necessary adaptation that ends up defining their entire career. To fill the void left by Wilkeson, the band brought in Ed King.
He was a guitarist who had previously played with the psychedelic band Strawberry Alarm Clock.
King stepped in and played bass on the album, contributing to the songwriting and providing some guitar work as well.
After the album was released, Ronnie Van Zant invited Leon Wilkeson to return.
And Wilkeson agreed to face his anxieties and rejoin,
When Wilkeson resumed his duties on bass, Ed King stayed in the band.
shifting entirely to guitar.
And this is the exact moment the band's signature 3-guitar attack was born. King, Rossington, and Collins all playing guitar simultaneously.
Why is having 3 guitarists such a massive advantage for their sound?
Well, it completely changes their sonic capabilities. In a standard rock band with 1 or 2 guitarists, you are limited in a live setting.
You might have one person playing rhythm and one playing lead.
But in the studio, bands often overdub multiple guitar parts to create a thicker, more complex sound.
By having 3 highly skilled guitarists on stage, this band could replicate those dense, layered studio sounds in a live concert setting.
They could have a rhythm part, a lead melody, and a counter melody all happening at once.
It created a massive wall of sound that became their defining musical characteristic.
Their debut album, featuring a phonetically spelled title to help people pronounce their name, was released in August 1973.
It was a massive success.
The album featured Free Bird, which received heavy national airplay.
And eventually reached number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart.
Moving into 1973 and 1974, their fan base expanded rapidly.
Largely due to securing a spot opening for The Who on the United States leg of their Quadrophenia tour.
Imagine being a relatively new band and suddenly playing arenas alongside The Who.
It must have been an incredible education in performing.
In 1974, they released their follow-up album, Second Helping,
This album cemented their breakthrough status.
and featured all 3 guitarists, King, Collins, and Rossington, collaborating with Van Zant on the songwriting,
Second Helping contained the track Sweet Home Alabama.
which became their only single to crack the top 10, peaking at number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Sweet Home Alabama requires careful analysis, particularly regarding its origins as a direct response to Neil Young's song Southern Man.
The public perception for decades was that there was a bitter, hostile rivalry between Neil Young and Ronnie Van Zant.
The factual reality, according to our sources, is entirely the opposite.
Young and Van Zant were not rivals. They were actually good friends and mutual fans of each other's music.
The lyrical back and forth was a musical dialogue, not a personal feud.
In fact, Neil Young even wrote the song Powderfinger specifically for the band to record.
Although they never ended up recording it.
It is genuinely wild to think about that dynamic. People assumed for decades that they hated each other because of those lyrics.
But they were actually exchanging songs in respect.
The pace of their success, however, exacted a severe toll on the band members.
By 1975, the grueling touring schedule led to significant personal issues.
During a European tour in January of that year, original drummer Bob Burns suffered a mental breakdown and left the band.
He was replaced by Artemis Pyle, a former United States Marine.
The pressure continued to mount during the creation of their third album, Nothin' Fancy.
The tracking for this entire album was completed in an astonishingly brief 17 days.
A 17-day recording schedule for a major label release is incredibly constricted.
To give you context, major albums often take months of meticulous tracking and mixing.
Completing tracking in 17 days indicates a schedule driven almost entirely by relentless touring demands rather than artistic pacing.
Al Cooper, their producer, was unhappy with the band's lack of preparation.
Following the tracking sessions, Cooper and the band mutually agreed to part ways.
Cooper stayed behind to mix the album while the band immediately departed for another tour.
While Nothing Fancy performed adequately, it saw lower sales than their previous records.
The pressure finally fractured the lineup midway through the subsequent tour.
That fracture involved Ed King making an abrupt and dramatic exit.
The circumstances leading to his departure were highly stressful.
King's guitar roadie and Ronnie Van Zant were arrested together and forced to spend the night in jail.
Because his roadie was unavailable, King had to play that night's concert using old guitar strings.
The strings broke during the performance, resulting in a substandard show.
Following the concert, Van Zant publicly belittled King in front of the rest of the band.
King, believing that Van Zant was entirely responsible for his roadie being in jail in the first place, quit the band on the spot.
And he returned home to Los Angeles.
King's departure highlights the volatile environment within the group at that time.
When you consider the physical exhaustion of relentless touring, the pressure of follow-up success, and the sheer proximity of these individuals living on top of one another for months on end, it is not surprising that the structural integrity of the band began to falter.
They were operating at a breaking point.
This brings us to a very dark period in 1976 and 1977, where the shadow of tragedy began to fall over the group.
Over the Labor Day weekend in 1976, both Allen Collins and Gary Rossington were involved in separate, serious car accidents.
Rossington's accident was particularly alarming. He crashed his car into an oak tree while under the influence of alcohol and quaaludes.
This incident directly inspired the ominous track That Smell.
Ronnie Van Zant and Allen Collins composed the song as a blunt cautionary tale aimed directly at Rossington and other members of the band regarding their substance abuse.
Rossington later admitted repeatedly that he was the Prince Charming referenced in the lyrics of the song.
That smell serves as a musical intervention.
Following the birth of his daughter in 1976, Ronnie Van Zant was actively trying to clean up his own act
and curtail the cycle of heavy drinking and brawling that had become central to the band's public reputation.
The song represents a conscious, public effort to save his bandmates from themselves. It is a very stark warning.
Amidst this turmoil, the band found a massive infusion of new energy when guitarist and vocalist Steve Gaines joined in 1976.
The addition of Steve Gaines seemed to rejuvenate everything.
Ronnie Van Zant was absolutely struck by Steve Gaines' abilities.
Both publicly and privately, Van Zant marveled at the multiple talents of the newest member,
going so far as to claim that the rest of the band would all be in his shadow one day.
Gaines's contributions to the 1977 album Street Survivors were substantial.
He co-wrote and provided co-lead vocals on the track. You got that right.
He wrote the rousing guitar piece, I Know a Little.
Furthermore, Van Zant was so confident in Gaines that he allowed Gaines to sing lead vocals on his self-penned blues track, Ain't No Good Life.
This is a monumental detail because it was the only song in the entire pre-Crash catalog to feature a lead vocalist other than Ronnie Van Zant.
The Street Survivors album positioned the band for their biggest tour yet.
They had weathered the internal storms, integrated a brilliant new songwriter, and the music reflected a revitalized, mature group.
However, the tragic irony is that just as Van Zant was attempting to steer the band toward a healthier future with cautionary tales like That Smell, an entirely different, uncontrollable tragedy struck.
We need to talk about October 20 in 1977.
It is impossible to overstate just how devastating this day was for the band, their families, and the entire music world.
Just 3 days after the release of the Street Survivors album, the band performed at the Greenville Memorial Auditorium in Greenville, South Carolina.
Following the show, the band and their crew boarded a chartered Convair CV-240 aircraft,
bound for Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where they were scheduled to play at Louisiana State University the next night.
During the flight, the aircraft ran out of fuel.
The pilots attempted an emergency landing, but the plane crashed in a heavily forested area 5 miles northeast of Gillsburg, Mississippi.
The casualties from the impact were devastating.
Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, and backup singer Cassie Gaines, who was Steve's older sister, were killed.
Assistant road manager Dean Kilpatrick, pilot Walter McCreary, and co-pilot John Gray also lost their lives in the crash.
The remaining band members, Collins, Rossington, Wilkeson, Powell, Pyle, along with backup singer Leslie Hawkins, tour manager Ron Eckerman, and several road crew members suffered incredibly serious injuries.
The immediate aftermath of the crash sent shockwaves through the surviving members and the industry.
The Street Survivors album quickly became the band's second platinum album, shooting up to number 5 on the Billboard 200, which remains their highest chart position.
In a chilling coincidence, the original cover artwork for the Street Survivors album featured a photograph of the band standing amidst flames, with Steve Gaines nearly obscured by the fire.
Out of deep respect for the deceased, and specifically at the request of Steve Gaines' widow, Teresa, MCA Records withdrew the original fiery cover.
They replaced it with a similar photograph of the band standing against a simple, solid black background.
The eerie timing of that album artwork and the subsequent alteration underscores the immense grief surrounding the release.
The psychological burden placed on the surviving members cannot be overstated.
They lost their leader, their newest brilliant songwriter, their backup singer, and their crew, while simultaneously dealing with their own severe physical trauma.
From 1977 to 1987, the band entered a profound hiatus.
They officially disbanded, as the structural and emotional core of the group had been completely decimated.
They reunited on only one occasion during this period.
In January 1979, the surviving members gathered at Charlie Daniels' Volunteer Jam V to perform an instrumental version of Freebird.
Leon Wilkeson attended, but could not play, as he was still undergoing physical therapy for his badly broken left arm.
During this decade-long hiatus, the survivors attempted to move forward musically.
Gary Rossington, Alan Collins, Leon Wilkeson, and Billy Powell formed the Rossington-Collins Band.
They released 2 albums in the early 1980s.
What is most notable about this project is their deliberate choice of a lead vocalist.
They hired a woman named Dale Krantz to sing lead.
This was a calculated artistic decision designed to avoid any direct comparisons to Ronnie Van Zant,
and to dispel any suggestions that this new group was just a reborn version of their former band.
Hiring a female lead singer wasn't just a musical choice. It was their way of saying that absolutely no man could ever step into Ronnie Van Zant's shoes.
It was a profound expression of grief and respect.
It allowed them to play music together without feeling like they were trying to replace the irreplaceable.
However, the Rossington-Collins Band eventually fractured when Rossington and Collins had a falling out over their affections for Dale Krantz.
Rossington and Krantz later married and formed the Rossington Band.
For Alan Collins, the years following the plane crash were marked by unimaginable personal tragedies.
In 1980, his wife Kathy died from a massive hemorrhage while miscarrying their 3rd child.
Collins was devastated and subsequently turned heavily to alcohol and drugs.
6 years later, in January 1986, Collins crashed his car into a ditch near his home in Jacksonville.
The crash killed his girlfriend, Deborah Jean Watts, and left Collins permanently paralyzed from the chest down.
The accumulation of tragedy surrounding the founding members is staggering.
The other survivors also sought different paths during this era. Artemis Pyle formed the Artemis Pyle Band in 1982.
Keyboardist Billy Powell took a very different route, joining a Christian rock band named Vision.
During his performances with Vision, Powell would frequently speak to the audience about his spiritual conversion, which occurred directly as a result of surviving the near-fatal plane crash.
This brings us to 1987, a full decade after the crash, when the band decided to mount a full-scale tribute tour.
This return featured 5 major members from the pre-crash era.
Survivors Gary Rossington, Billy Powell, Leon Wilkeson, and Artemis Pyle, alongside guitarist Ed King, who had left the band 2 years prior to the accident.
To handle the immense task of lead vocals, they brought in Ronnie Van Zant's younger brother, Johnny Van Zant.
Because Alan Collins was paralyzed from his 1986 car accident, he could not play guitar on the tour.
Instead, he served as the musical director, choosing his former bandmate Randall Hall to act as his stand-in.
Collins' participation in the tour also intersected with the legal consequences of his accident.
As part of a plea deal to avoid prison time for his DUI manslaughter charge, Collins was wheeled onto the stage every single night of the tour to address the audience.
He explained exactly why he could no longer perform, delivering this message right before the band played That Smell, the very song originally written to warn him about the dangers of substance abuse.
Collins ultimately died of pneumonia in 1990 at the age of 37.
The emotional weight of Collins coming on stage every night to deliver that specific message right before that specific song is incredibly heavy.
That 1987 tour was initially intended to be a one-time tribute.
However, the band chose to continue operating and touring after the tribute concluded.
This decision immediately resulted in complex legal battles.
Judy Van Zant Jenis and Teresa Gaines Rappel, the widows of Ronnie Van Zant and Steve Gaines, filed a lawsuit against the surviving members.
They argued that continuing the band violated a post-crash agreement the members had made, which explicitly stated they would not exploit the band's name for profit.
The intersection of legacy, legalities, and business here is highly intricate.
The resolution of that lawsuit resulted in a specific settlement.
The widows were granted nearly 30% of the band's touring revenues, which represented the financial shares their husbands would have earned had they lived.
Furthermore, the settlement established a strict legal proviso regarding the touring roster.
It dictated that any group touring under the band's name must always include Gary Rossington, plus at least 2 of the 4 other specific pre-crash survivors: Leon Wilkeson, Billy Powell, Ed King, and Artemis Pyle.
Operating under these legal mandates, the band entered a new era.
They released new studio albums, including an album in 1991 and The Last Rebel in 1993.
But the period from 1986 into the 2010s was characterized by a revolving door of musicians, ongoing medical emergencies, and further loss of life.
In 1996, Ed King was forced to leave the band to undergo a heart transplant.
Interestingly, after he recovered, the band did not allow him to rejoin.
At the same time, Ricky Medlock returned to the group, leading to a major retooling of their guitar lineup.
The sheer resilience required to keep the band functioning during this era is notable.
They were pushing forward through constant adversity.
The tragedy simply did not stop.
Bassist Leon Wilkeson was found dead in his hotel room in 2001 due to emphysema and chronic liver disease.
Keyboardist Billy Powell died of a suspected heart attack in 2009.
Bassist Ian Evans also died of cancer in 2009.
Original drummer Bob Burns was killed in a car crash in 2015.
Ed King passed away in 2018.
Despite this unprecedented string of medical emergencies and passings, the band continued to secure major industry recognition.
In 2004, Rolling Stone magazine ranked them number 95 on their list of the 100 greatest artists of all time.
In 2006, they were officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, performing at the ceremony alongside returning pre-crash members.
Also during this era, the band faced a significant archival loss.
They were among hundreds of recording artists whose original master recordings were believed to have been completely destroyed in the 2008 Universal fire.
Universal Music Group spent tens of millions of dollars attempting to replace the massive amount of historical audio lost in that blaze.
We must also impartially report on the band's complex relationship with their symbology, specifically their use of the Confederate flag.
From the 1970s through the 2010s, the band prominently utilized the flag as part of their stage shows and merchandise.
In September 2012, during an appearance on CNN, the band briefly discontinued the use of the flag.
The stated reason for this removal was a desire to distance themselves from racist organizations that had adopted the symbol.
However, that decision was quickly met with intense protests from their fan base.
Following the backlash, the band reversed their decision and reinstated the flag.
Their cited reasoning for the reversal was that, for them, the flag represented Southern American heritage and states' rights symbolism rather than racism.
Ultimately, after years of utilizing the imagery, the band officially ceased all use of the Confederate flag, starting with their 2019 tour.
This sequence of events provides an objective look at how the band navigated the shifting expectations of their audience.
They were balancing their historical identity against modern cultural interpretations, making adjustments, facing backlash, and eventually making a definitive change in 2019.
As we move into the final chapters of this timeline, starting in 2018, the band announced the Last of the Street Survivors farewell tour.
Around the same time, their legacy was cemented on screen with the release of the 2018 documentary If I Leave Here Tomorrow, and the 2020 biopic film titled Street Survivors.
But the most significant shift in the band's foundational makeup occurred on March 5, 2023.
Gary Rossington, the very last original founding member of the band, passed away at the age of 71.
Rossington's passing raises a fascinating philosophical question for you to consider.
Think about your favorite band for a second. Now imagine going to see them, but not a single founding member is alive to perform on that stage.
What constitutes a band when absolutely zero original founding members remain?
We must look back at the legal proviso established in the late 1980s, which required Rossington and 2 other pre-crash members to be present.
Following Rossington's death, those strict legal terms were completely waived.
In April 2023, the band confirmed that despite having no founders left, they would continue touring.
They currently have a Double Vision tour with Foreigner scheduled for 2026 and a new member, Robbie Harrington, joining on bass in 2025.
The narrative of the band is beautifully bookended by a release from November 2023.
Dolly Parton released a cover of the band's iconic song Free Bird on her Rockstar album.
What makes this cover so historically significant is the personnel involved.
The track features slide guitar work by Gary Rossington, which was recorded prior to his death.
It features drum work by surviving pre-Crash member Artemis Pyle.
Most remarkably, with the explicit permission of Ronnie Van Zant's widow, the track incorporates part of Ronnie Van Zant's original vocal track from the 1970s recording.
By combining the voices and instruments of the past with the performers of the present, that track acts as a bridge across time.
It allows the deceased founders to participate in modern interpretations of their work, uniting the living and the dead in a single piece of audio.
It is a profound testament to the lasting impact of the music they created in those Jacksonville carports so many years ago.
To recap the staggering arc we have covered today, we have traced the journey of local teenagers from Jacksonville, Florida, practicing in carports and playing at local battles of the bands, to ascending to the absolute pinnacle of global rock stardom.
We have examined how they built a signature three-guitar sound that defined a genre.
We have documented their survival through devastating physical and mental losses, their navigation of complex legal battles regarding their own name, their adjustment to shifting cultural tides, and their permanent enshrinement in the rock pantheon even after every single original founder has passed away.
I want to offer a final thought for you to mull over. Consider the 2008 Universal fire, where the master tapes of their earliest recordings were likely reduced to ashes.
Think about how the physical artifacts of this band, the original founders themselves, their initial unedited album covers, the very magnetic tape holding their original studio sessions, have all been lost to time or tragedy.
Yet despite the destruction of the physical elements, the music remains completely indestructible.
The physical artifacts can perish, but the sonic architecture they built in the 1970s continues to live on entirely through the collective memory of the culture.
It really is an enduring legacy.
Thanks for listening.